Emotional connection is the key to reconnect in your relationship. But like most men, you might be wondering, what the fuck is that? How do I emotionally reconnect with my partner? Before I share the answer, you must know that without this simple principle, you're doomed to a marriage lacking sex, intimacy, love, or respect. It is the #1 cause of divorce, which means that when you understand what it is and how you can actually fix it, you'll have a drastically different relationship. One where your wife desires you, admires you, and wants you. So if you want to get the spark back in your relationship, you're about to uncover how emotional connection works and how you can use it to reconnect with your wife. Now let's address the elephant in the room here. This whole idea of emotional connection is very foreign to most men. And look, I'll put my hand up and say, I've been there too. After coaching over 1,000 guys on how to fix their marriage and reconnect with their wife, reconnect with their children, and find work-life balance, I've put it down to 3 simple steps you can implement to reconnect with your partner. But what does this actually mean? It means understanding each other on such a deep level that instead of growing apart in your relationship, you actually grow together. This is a hidden superpower, emotional connection, because not only can you use it with your partner to have more sex, more intimacy, more love, you can also use it with your team members in your business or career to get them to perform better, so you can make more money with less time and energy. You can use it with your children to get them to respect you, understand you, and ultimately follow your lead. It is such a powerful tool, and 98% of men have no idea how to use it. So let's dive into what these 3 simple steps are to have emotional connection so that you can understand it and implement it in your relationships. The first part here is understanding your partner. Before you can emotionally connect with her, which is what so many women say they want, you have to actually understand what that means to her. Because your idea of emotional connection, and we're going to get into that soon, is going to be very different to her idea of emotional connection. So how do you do this? How do you find out what your partner wants? Well, there are 4 key areas that create emotional connection inside of a relationship. The first one is emotions. You've got to be able to understand the different range of emotions that your partner feels on a daily, weekly, and monthly basis. You might be thinking, well, I know what the emotions are. She gets fucking pissed off, she gets angry, we argue, it's terrible. I'm talking about being able to step into your partner's shoes, despite how annoying it is, despite how triggering it is, despite how bad the relationship is, despite the fact that you might not be getting what you want, despite the fact that your partner has a role to play. You've got to be able to understand what emotions go through her body. You got to understand why those emotions happen. We'll get into how to do that in a second, but why is my wife Rosie upset today instead of happy? Why was she upset yesterday and she's happy today? Why is she loving and cuddly now, but she doesn't want to have sex before? There are emotions that go on inside of her body. Anger, sadness, fear, hurt, guilt, shame. All these things happen internally inside of her. And when she tells me that she wants emotional connection, what she really is saying is, I want you to understand how I'm feeling right now. So many men, I used to be one of them, when our partner is feeling any sort of emotion, we struggle to connect with it and we say, I don't know how I can help you. I talked to a guy a few days ago whose partner was dealing with anxiety. And his response, typical Australian bloke, was, I don't know what the fuck you want me to do. So you got to understand for this person, when they're feeling a negative emotion and they don't feel understood by you, that creates a massive wedge in the relationship. Want to know how this works both ways? If you've ever worked hard in your business or career, only to come home feeling unappreciated, feeling like your partner's upset at you for coming home late, even though you're working for them, you know that feeling of disconnection that occurs. There's resentment, there's frustration, you don't feel understood. It's the exact same for your partner. So you've got to understand what are the emotions she's feeling day to day, and you've got to be able to bob and weave in between those emotions. The second part of emotional connection is the thoughts that go on for your partner. So your partner is constantly going to be having thoughts inside of their head. As human beings, we have about 80,000 thoughts per day. And a lot of these thoughts are just random fucking thoughts. For men, mostly thoughts about sex. For women, mostly thoughts about other things. Now, thoughts are simply language aka stories, aka beliefs. We don't think like cavemen. We don't go, ooh, ah, 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 ah. We think in terms of words. So your partner is feeling like you don't care. She's feeling upset. She's feeling angry at you for coming home late. She wants emotional connection. She wants you to understand those feelings, but you can't emotionally connect and you can't understand those feelings if you don't know what she's thinking in association with those feelings. Let me explain what I mean because it sounds a bit complicated. It's really not. When she's upset and sad, her language, her thoughts, her beliefs, her stories might be, he never spends time with me anymore. All he does is work. When I ask him how his day was, he just grunts. Every time we try to talk, we get into an argument. These are all words that go on in their head and repeat over and over again. If you've ever had a stressful day at work, you'll know what this feels like. You're lying in bed, thinking about the day. John didn't do his job properly. How am I going to pay the bills? My wife doesn't want to have sex with me. They're all words that go through your head associated with your emotions. So it's the exact same for your partner. You've got to know what emotions they're feeling, and you've got to know what they're thinking moment to moment. Now, what most of us do is we mind read. We expect to know what our partner's thinking, but there's only one way you can know. I'm going to walk you through what it is in a second. So emotional connection means understanding their emotions. It means understanding their thoughts, their beliefs, and their stories. The third thing we must understand for emotional connection are the triggers. What are the triggers? What are the moments in time? What are the things that happen that cause those emotions and that cause those thoughts? You don't just wake up angry or sad. There is something that triggers it. You might think about something that happened in the past in your relationship, and then you feel angry. The trigger is having that thought about what happened. You might walk through the door and your partner sees you come through late and you've got the scowl on your face and you're pissed off and grumpy. The trigger is you walking through the door with a negative energy. There are moments in time, triggers, that cause those emotions and thoughts your partner has. You've got to get really good at acknowledging what are those triggers for your partner, and when you understand that, it creates a degree of emotional connection. And the final section here, the fourth section, is understanding the fears, the traumas, the past, the upbringing of your partner. This is going to tie everything together. The reason your partner gets emotional, the reason your partner has negative thoughts or thinks about how you work too much or thinks about how she's ungrateful or whatever these things that you complain about for your partner, whatever triggers her, most of that comes from her upbringing. Most of that comes from her childhood. Most of that comes from her parents, her friends, the people in her life that have raised her, been around her for 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years, her entire life, have molded her into this human being that has a perspective of the world. Let me explain how this worked with my wife. My wife was cheated on in her longest relationship before me. Her partner was a stoner. He smoked weed. Her parents didn't give her the love she wanted when she was younger. Her mother left her when she was 4 years old. So not only do I need to understand my wife's emotions, her thoughts, her triggers, I need to understand why those things are happening. So for example, I smoke medical marijuana. I've smoked marijuana since I was 18 years old. I don't have a lot of it, but to this day, I have medical marijuana. I used to smoke a lot of fucking weed, right? When I first got with my partner, I was working hard, providing, giving her the life she wanted. I'd come home, I'd have some weed. She'd get angry at me for having weed. I'm like, I'm not hurting you. She would get triggered. She would feel this negative emotion. She was angry at me, upset at me. And her thoughts were, he's gonna cheat on me because of the trauma from her past. Her mother left her, her partner cheated. So those things molded her thoughts, feelings, emotions. It molded the triggers that applied to me. So you got to understand these 4 areas to emotionally connect with your partner. What are they thinking? What are they feeling? What triggers those thoughts and feelings? And what happened to them in the past? Their fears, past traumas, their upbringing, to get them to that point. The second part here to emotional connection is extremely simple, but you're probably going to find it extremely difficult. Let me explain what I mean. Once we have a little bit of understanding as to what our partner's emotions, thoughts, stories, triggers, and past traumas and things that have caused this to happen are, we've got to do the exact same for ourselves. And this is where it requires a man to do some soul searching, some introspection, looking within yourself, which most men are either afraid to do or they tell themselves they're too busy to do. Now, I'm assuming if you're listening to this podcast and you've made it this far into the video, you're a man who's willing to do whatever it takes to fucking crush it, to win and succeed in life, to have a great relationship, a great business, a great marriage, to be a leader and role model. That's an assumption, but I'd hope that that assumption is true. And that means for you to do this, you're gonna have to dedicate the time and energy to actually look within yourself. Most guys are too busy, they're too stressed in their business to do this. Try to put that aside. So what are the emotions that you feel day to day? Do you feel frustrated? Do you feel angry? Do you feel triggered? Do you feel sad? Do you feel anxious? Do you feel depressed? Most men suppress their emotions. We haven't been taught how to express them. We haven't been taught how to share them. We haven't been taught how to be vulnerable because as men, we've been told that's weak, especially high performance men. I'm a leader in my business. I'm successful. I'm wearing this mask, pretending like everything's okay. But on the background, for so many years of my life, I was suffering from severe anxiety. I felt like every moment something bad was going to happen. I'd get into these deep states of depression. I'd feel like nothing was ever enough. I'd feel all the stress and pressure on my shoulders, but I wouldn't share that with my wife. Instead, she would see me express it through being grumpy, through being angry, through not communicating well. She didn't know what was going on for me because I didn't understand my emotions and I thought it was weak to share them, which is absolute fucking bullshit. And this is why so many men get divorced. So before we explain how to actually process emotions, the first step here is understanding your own emotions. The way we do this at The Empowered Man is every morning, 365 days a year, we write down, how am I feeling today? We get a pen and paper in a journal, write down, how am I feeling today? And we write down our feelings. I'm feeling stressed. I'm feeling angry. We acknowledge those feelings so we have awareness around them, which helps us understand them. The second thing we've got to understand, just like with our partner or anyone, is what are the thoughts? What am I thinking today? What am I believing? What are the stories going through my head? My wife doesn't care. The house is a mess. Not this shit again. What's the point? I can't rely on anyone at work. These are all thoughts, stories, and language. You have them, your partner has them, they're gonna be completely different. You need to understand your own thoughts. What's going through your head every single day? This sounds crazy, but we've used these two simple questions with clients who make over $200 million. We coach successful men. How am I feeling today? What am I thinking about today? Brain dumping that on pen and paper every morning so you understand yourself better. The third is understanding your triggers. I've coached on this in previous podcasts, but if you're new, make sure that you understand what your triggers are. What are the things in your life that cause negative emotions, negative thoughts, negative feelings, negative stories when it comes into your life? How do those triggers come from your relationship? When I come home and the house is a mess, do I get triggered and then feel angry and think that my wife doesn't appreciate me? When I go to bed and I put my arm on my wife's shoulder and I want to have sex and she shrugs my arm off, that's the trigger, that's the moment in time that makes me feel like I'm not desired, makes me feel inadequate, makes me feel like I'm not good enough, makes me think I'm working so hard and giving you everything you want. When do I get something in return? See how the trigger creates the thoughts and the emotions? And then finally, the fourth part, just like with your partner, is understanding your fears, your past traumas, your upbringings. A lot of men have these and we don't acknowledge them. My father and my mother separated when I was 4. My father was an alcoholic. He drank a lot. He was a victim. I love my father. He might watch this. I love you. I appreciate you, but he didn't have the tools. That's just a fucking fact. I'm not going to sit here and not pretend like that was the fact. My father didn't teach me because he wasn't around a lot. It's not his fault. My parents separated. So I was raised by my mother. My mother is a stress head, so I picked up some of that stuff. I was bullied as a child. I took a lot of drugs and drank alcohol when I was young. I had severe anxiety. I didn't like myself. I had no confidence. All those things have built me into who I am today. Now I've resolved a lot of those things, but if I get emotional or triggered or upset at someone at work, that might come from what I learned when I was 5 years old. We all have these traumas, these past events that have happened to us and for us that most of us don't acknowledge. If there's any area of your life that's not working, your business, your relationships, your stress, your triggers, your health, you can be damn sure it's got to do with what you think, what you feel, what triggers you, but also your past that's made you who you are today. And what's really cool is you can change who you are in the moment by changing your perception of the past. So you got to understand these 4 areas for your partner, but you've also got to understand them for yourself. What is your partner feeling? What are they thinking? What are their triggers? And what has their past created for them? You got to understand yourself. What are your emotions? What are your thoughts and stories and beliefs? What are your triggers? And what are the past things that have brought that to the front? What are the past things you need to deal with? Once you understand your partner and you understand yourself, now you're ready to create what we call emotional connection. And that third part here is something I talk about all the time that most men really struggle with. It's communication. It's being able to communicate and ask the right questions to understand these 4 areas within your partner. It's also being able to communicate with yourself and understand yourself better, and then share with your partner what you're thinking, what you're feeling. Share with her what's triggering you. Share with her the shit you're dealing with from your past, the things that have fucked you up and that don't serve you anymore. It's being able to understand her, talk to her about what she's feeling, what she's thinking, what's triggering her, and understanding her on a deeper level. You do this by asking open-ended questions. Hey, I know you're upset. How are you feeling right now? What are you thinking about? What stories are going through your head? What triggers you about me? What are the triggers that come up in our relationship that are making things worse? What are the things I do every single day that upset you? What are the things I do that you love? What are the things I do that you hate? You can already see how difficult this will be for so many fucking men, because as men, we sweep things under the rug and we hide. This is why I used to drink alcohol at the end of the day. This is why I used to scroll on screens and sedate with social media. Because as men, it's a lot easier to just sweep shit under the rug instead of dealing with it. But if your partner wants you to emotionally connect with her, that means she's got negative emotions, negative thoughts, negative triggers, negative trauma from the past, and it's related to you. So whether you communicate about it or not, it already exists. And if you don't resolve it or work through it, you're gonna grow apart, and it's a recipe for marriage breakdown, divorce, broken families, millions of dollars lost in assets. It is a recipe for disaster. I've seen it time and time again. The beautiful thing is, just like any skill in life, what you do for a living in your career or business, you weren't good at it at the beginning. It took reps. It took putting in reps, 1,000 reps, 10,000 reps, and the muscle got bigger. You get to develop the muscle of having hard conversations and getting to understand this person. That's what emotional connection is. It's understanding these 4 areas by communicating about them. You might find it difficult. You might find it scary. You might not want to do it. But once you do it again, you do it again, you become better and better and better until it becomes the new normal. So ask your partner what emotions they feel in your relationship. What are the positive emotions? What are the negative emotions? Don't do this when you're angry in an argument, by the way. Plan this, like set some time aside. Ask them what negative thoughts they have about you. How do they perceive you? How do they see you? What words would they use to describe you? And then ask them, what are the triggers in your relationship? What makes them feel these negative feelings and think these negative thoughts? What are the positive triggers that they love? Try and understand. You can look at their parents, look at their friends, try and understand why they are the way they are. Often we go, I don't know why my partner's acting this way. We don't actually make the time to know. I know that my wife has every right to be upset at me when I look in the direction of another woman because she's got a story, which I know isn't true, that I'm gonna go fuck her. That story comes from her ex-boyfriend who cheated on her. So I can judge her for that and emotionally disconnect, or I can try help her work through that and be understanding of that. On the flip side, ask yourself, what are my emotions? Communicate with yourself. What are my triggers? What are my thoughts? And once you understand yourself better, you ask your partner about them, you understand them, you connect with them, and then to drive the nail home, to really create emotional connection, you want to get really good at sharing with your partner what's going on for you. So you understand them and these 4 areas, and then you vulnerability, calmly, patiently explain to them what's going on for you. Let me give you an example. Had a fucking stressful week. I fired 3 people. Our business is growing. Expenses are through the roof. We're helping heaps of men. We're doing great, but it's been really hard. So I go downstairs after a long day. I ask my wife, how was your day? Oh, I'm fine. No, I know you, babe. I know you're not fine. What's going on? Oh, I'm just really stressed. Well, tell me more about that. What's making you feel that way? So I don't like the thing you said to me earlier. Okay, let's talk about that. Let's work through it. Emotional connection, communication, understanding. Once I understand her and her day, I don't wait for her to ask. I say, yeah, my day was pretty rough too. Do you have the capacity or the bandwidth to talk about it? She says, yes. Now I've got buy-in for my wife to listen to me, to lighten my load. That's our partner's job. But so many men feel like they can't communicate with their partner because they don't have that emotional connection. Yeah, I felt quite stressed today. I tell her what I'm feeling. I felt pissed off at this guy. And I was thinking like, what's the point of it all? But I never stay in victim mentality. I share what the problem is and I always present a solution. So what I did was I fired this guy. I'm about to hire 2 more. It's going to be all good. And I'm able to communicate with her about the things that triggered me, communicate with her about the negative emotions and thoughts so she understands me better, which means she finds it easier to support me. She appreciates me more because she understands what I'm going through instead of me expecting her to know. It's crazy when you do this effectively. If my wife triggers me and says something and pisses me off, I'll calmly and patiently, emotional connection, communication, say, I know that wasn't intentional, but the way you said that wasn't okay. If I come home after a long day and she asks me something like, I don't know. She goes, please don't speak to me like that. I know it's not intentional, but that triggers me. This is such a deep level of connection and communication because we have permission and buy-in, and this might take you a while to have these hard conversations and work through emotions, thoughts, triggers in the moment, which changes that past trauma and the shit that used to happen and creates a new reality for you and your relationship. So let's recap all this because there's a lot of fucking information, but it's extremely simple. You and your partner both have thoughts, feelings, emotions, triggers, and past trauma, things that have made you who you are. The only way you can truly emotionally connect, true love, true connection, is understanding for each of you what those things are. And the only way you can do that is by asking questions, exploring yourself, exploring them, exploring each other on a daily, weekly, and monthly basis. And this is where true connection happens. You grow together. You become more in love. Rosie and I, after 7 years, are more in love than ever. We have just as much sex as before. We're connected. We're happy. We're going to spend the rest of our lives together. You deserve that. And if you currently don't have it, you can be damn sure you're missing these things. So if this is something you struggle with, if you're like, this makes sense, but how the fuck do I implement it? Then I guarantee you're missing one thing, and it's a plan. If you knew what to do, you would have done it. So I hope you got value from this. If you did, give it a thumbs up, give it 5 stars. But if you want to take this to the next level, you want to have emotional connection with your partner, you want to understand each other and not just be successful in business, but in your relationships. If you want to take this principle and understand your team, understand your kids, fix your marriage, reconnect with your kids, and find work-life balance, then go down below. There'll be a link. It's the first link in the description, and you'll be able to book a coaching session with our Empowered Man team. And on that session, we'll literally build out your custom Empowered Man roadmap to create that connection, to reconnect with your partner. But not just that, to win and succeed in every area of your life. So if that's something you want, go down below right now, book a coaching session with the Empowered Man team, and I'll see you for the next episode of the Empowered Man podcast.